Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. 2 videos in 2 days? I know, it seems almost like old times, but I thought I would put this one together. Originally I was thinking about just carrying this over into the live stream, and honestly, the live stream is not exactly short, so we definitely have time, but I do have a couple of agenda items and a possible guest or two that I'm going to invite for a couple of things that I do want to talk about. So if we depending on how long those discussions go, we may squeeze this in there somewhere, but I thought it would still be worth at least discussing for a little bit, because as usual, we've got the idea itself. And then, of course, there's a couple of other underlying things that I always want to touch on a little bit that I think are relevant to the overall discussion. And I also kind of want to get your thoughts on the general thing. So, good old backyard breaks, back in kind of a discussion point again. So Sue's here, Yank's chick. I did see it in a couple of other places, but this is probably the easiest one for me to pull up. Is Josh Luber is going to be doing a big basketball break with backyard breaks this weekend. So Sue's here asked the question: what are the thoughts on the Fanatics trading cards chief vision officer partnering with them? By the way, I still like the chief vision officer is some kind of a pseudo title, but anyway, it is a good legitimate question that is brought up here. And obviously you're going to get some very strong visceral reactions. Backyard Breaks has a bit of a shifty reputation. Now, one thing I'm going to do is that there may be a lot of folks who are familiar with it. The name may ring a bell, but you don't know too many of the particulars. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to include in the description a link to this article from Card Lines. I only recently found them. I've found them for something else that I was looking into. And they actually put together an article here in mid-January that did a pretty good job with putting together a synopsis of the Backyard Breaks Trevor Lawrence Gold Kaboom scandal, which was kind of what brought them into kind of the forefront for a lot of us, because I hadn't really heard of them prior to that. And but obviously they've been around since, and recently they were the ones that pulled the LeBron logo man, the triple logo man, that obviously has been the subject of a lot of discussion. So of course it has to be Backyard Breaks. But like I said, for me, them in and of themselves doing a thing with Josh Luber, that is not the biggest story, although there's a couple of threads that I want to pull from that. But it is going to be another polarizing thing. And obviously some people are going to react very viscerally to this, the triple logo man, and now the Josh Luber thing on the heels of, hey, but what about these guys were the shifty guys that did that Trevor Lawrence thing? And that's all completely valid. I'm not gonna discredit any of that because it's a legitimate thing to think about. But like I said, for me, those of you who watch the channel a lot know that I'm very laissez-faire when it comes to the business and the hobby. Because the truth is, there's been a lot of shadiness here for a very long time. No matter how many people complain about it, it's not going to fix it, per se. The audience has always had the chance, though, and this is kind of a big thing for me. I'll talk about being very laissez-faire about it, but part of that is that the audience has always had the ability to vote with its wallet, so to speak. Vote with its attention, vote with its wallet. But time and time again, you, the audience, I just mean the general you, not necessarily the people that listen to videos like this, the general you has said over and over again, this is fine because you allow it. And not, no amount of screaming on YouTube and social media is going to change the fact that you, again, the general you, allow it. Because folks like Backyard Breaks for all the things they've done. And like I said, I'll include that article, the link to it in the description if you want to kind of get the synopsis and maybe refresh your memory or get a little more information about it if you're not quite sure what it was about. Even after that, Backyard Breaks to this day, I pull up their Instagram here, has 40,000 followers. And they get a reasonable amount of engagement on their stuff. Like this was the most recent thing, 106 likes on their little video here. So it's one of those things like, if you're going to get 106, 107 likes and people are going to watch the thing, and this was only 2 hours ago, so like they're still getting engagement on this stuff. Now, it could be people hate watching, but regardless of how you want to play this out, the fact that they pulled that LeBron, logo man, brought them again up to the forefront. They're going to do the thing with Josh Luber, again brings them up to the forefront. So they're getting all this promotion. So that's why I say the first issue that I want to bring to you beyond the, the complaints about Backyard Breaks is that despite everything they've done, and despite everything they do, if you just scroll through here and look at it, like they're ridiculous. But despite all this and the amount of mockery and the spoofs and parodies and all that good stuff, that doesn't matter. They're still around. People speak with their wallets. People still buy into breaks with them. So if people stop buying into breaks with them, then they would no longer be able to run this as a viable business. If they didn't have followers, they wouldn't be able to play these games, and it wouldn't lead to the second issue. So the first issue is the general hobby world being willing to just let stuff like this go. No amount of scandals for a lot of folks are enough to ever offset the fact that, once you're kind of in that infamy, portion of it, if you manage to hang around and just, let things blow over, you can just stick around, and you'll get innumerable opportunities in this hobby. We are nothing else if not forgiving. But that's the first point that I wanted to make about that. The second point that I want to make is going to be pertaining to Josh Luber. So like I said a second ago, despite all these things, they've managed to get yet another opportunity. So they have, obviously they had their scandals, and then, a lot of people gave them a lot of flack, and appropriately so. And despite that, they've managed to retain still a fair number of followers. They still are able to do a lot of breaks, and they've been able to get their hands on a lot of product, buying it. Now, that brings us over to the Luber thing, though. So now the question would be like, oh, well, why would why would somebody prominent Fanatics then, basically do a collaboration with them? Well, truthfully, there's really two scenarios you can take on this. We can take the conspiratorial one and be like, well, they bought a lot of the VFriends product, so maybe it's, kind of a little handshake deal that they bought a bunch of this stuff and it helped promote the one product there for Zero Cool. And in turn, Josh Luber is doing them kind of a solid as kind of a, thank you for participating at a decent amount in terms of buying that product. Now, there's your more conspiratorial side of it. If you want to take the more straightforward side of it, and probably the simpler solution, if I'm being completely honest with you, the simpler solution is that in this hobby, we have two things that I believe are very true, other than the forgiveness thing that I was kind of poking fun at a second ago. The first thing is we have in this hobby more access to more high profile and high end folks in the industry, CEOs, presidents, than just about any other industry in the world. In yesterday's video was intended to just focus in on some very specific things. I talked about Neo interviewing Peter, the CEO from SGC. How many other industries can you just, reach out and be like, hey, could you come on to a YouTube channel and do an interview for 90 minutes and talk about this, that, and the other thing related to your business? Is it possible? Absolutely. But normally you have to have a gigantic audience to be able to draw somebody in like that. The fact that you can, with a relatively small audience comparatively in the YouTube landscape, be able to get a CEO to come on, even, and spend an hour and a half, is telling in terms of the way this industry is. You can have folks that work at various companies in the space. And like I said, I'm an even smaller channel than that. And I've had Billy Celia from Upper Deck to come on, and we chat about, the Upper Deck wrestling products coming up, some of the AEW stuff. And I correspond with Billy here and there. I have folks, I have Brad from PSA Canada that obviously is internal, Canada-wise. They work with PSA. They're more of a bulk submitter, but that's kind of their current state in the hobby. But the reality is he has a fair amount of understanding because he does direct business with PSA. So you can have that. You can have folks from PSA. You can reach out to them. You can have other folks in the industry and reach out to them. Back in the channel in the earlier days, Carvin Chung, who has worked as a distributor, who has worked at the manufacturers, who has also produced his own product recently and did that product for the weekend. And I believe he's done another 2 or 3 since then. I don't remember exactly, but I've had him on the channel for hours talking about all kinds of different things. So we have an unparalleled amount of accessibility in the sports card landscape to these folks that are willing to talk and then, share some of the stuff in these various, even in relatively minuscule, tiny channels and tiny avenues that in other industries, like, why would they even answer the phone, so to speak? You have to go through the PR department and then, they'll lose your number. But in this industry, we have that ability. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it kind of plays into the first a little bit though, because it is so open, because the industry is so accessible in many ways. A lot of the folks in these spaces, if you don't want to take the conspiratorial tack, let me give you the other tack. The other tack is that nobody does vetting. Nobody vets the content or the channels that they're going to be on. In this case, nobody vets the breaker that you're going to collaborate with. No, or if they do, they decide that it's they're willing to basically deal with the heat because it's temporary. It doesn't matter. They had that whole Trevor Lawrence scandal and all the the backlash they got from it. They're still around. They were around long enough to be able to do the VFriends thing. They were around long enough to be able to pull the LeBron triple logo man. They were around to be able to now do this thing with Josh Luber. They're going to get some more heat, and then it'll blow over, and then we'll move on, and it'll be the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And those of us who have been around in the hobby a long time can't act too surprised. Or, well, I guess we could act surprised, but I don't see why, given the amount of shady characters and individuals who have been around the hobby long term. I'm not talking about a year or two. I'm not talking about 5 years. I'm talking about 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years that have been around forever that can kind of keep hovering around. I talked about in the past where, the Probstein had on Bill Mastro and they had a discussion. And in the course of that conversation, again, be careful who you're associating with. But Bill Master was about as infamous as it gets, and his issues have been documented. So it's not like it's new. But he was able to bring him on an Instagram Live, have a very pleasant conversation. And if you read some of the comments on there, it's like, oh, this Master seems like an okay guy. This is the problem in a nutshell. We are so wonderfully forgiving. We'll just let everything slide, even when we have documented examples of shadiness and some issues that were brought about as a result of that. Bill Master is about as infamous as it gets. And at the end of the day, under the right circumstances, if you're able to present in the correct light, it doesn't matter. But in a lot of other cases, people just don't do the vetting at all. It's one of those things where they're like, yeah, they buy a bunch of stuff. They're a breaker. Cool. I'll come on and do a thing with them. Great. So did you vet it? Don't worry about it. It's fine. So, and that's kind of the attitude that gets taken in a lot of the stuff. So you have to think, Josh Luber is in a prominent position at Fanatics, who is basically the de facto, industry leader now with all the licenses they're going to have and the ability and the power that they're going to wield over the industry. And the backyard breaker guys are able to get him on to do a break with them. At the same time that they have, like I said, they were able to get the product and source it to be able to get that triple logo man. You can decide for yourself if the fix was in on that one, but obviously there's always going to be that conspiratorial element. But regardless, it doesn't matter. The point is, they're still around, and they still have, as I said, a pretty decent sized following, all things considered, given the amount of things. But this is par for the course. This happens all the time. So that's why I say my bigger two issues are not that Josh Luber simply went on there with them. My bigger two issues are that despite everything they've done, despite all the issues and questions and heat and backlash that they've received, they still have a following, which in turn still makes them attractive, so that somebody like a Josh Luber could be looking into, basically doing a collaboration with them, and or they just don't do any vetting and they go, oh, they have a big following. Yeah, sure, I'll come on, without really doing any additional digging into it. So like I said, in this case, Suze asks a very legitimate question. What do you think about it? What are your thoughts? I would like to get what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to see what you think about it. And let me know, though. Obviously, there's always going to be the visceral reaction to these guys because they're pretty much about as polarizing as it gets. But my question to you isn't just beyond, oh, well, do you like backyard breaks? Look, if you do or you don't, that's your business. But beyond that, do you agree with kind of what I'm saying here? Do you think that the biggest problem is backyard breaks themselves, or are they more of a symptom of, A, they still retain a following despite every issue and controversy they've had, and B, on the other side of it from the Josh Luber perspective, that we're at the point still in this industry where no one really does much vetting in terms of who they're willing to associate or do collaborations with. Is that part of the issue? To me, those two other issues are bigger issues than the backyard breaks guys themselves. They're more of a symptom of a bigger problem. That's just kind of the angle that I take on it. I'd be curious to see kind of what your thoughts are. Like I said, I'll include a link to the article on the backyard breaks guys from the Trevor Lawrence thing, just in case you want some background on it. Otherwise, more videos coming up on the channel. I'll be doing the live stream on Friday. I'm 99% sure I will finalize it. It'll be the little thumbnail that'll be set up tonight. I'm 99% sure I'm going to start an hour earlier. I think we're going to do 8 p.m. Eastern time. Because I think Dakota Sports Card Anonymous is taking a couple of weeks off. And frankly, I got some stuff I need to do on Saturday, so I would love to have the normal size live stream, but at the same time be able to finish a little bit earlier too, so that Saturday isn't quite so rough. But we'll see. I'll finalize that tonight, and if that's the case, it'll be updated on my social media, as well as in the little thumbnail with the correct and updated timing. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.